And welcome back, and we have Ann Morrison, and then at the bottom of the hour, Professor McCANNEY. Ann, you've got lots of news to cover, and I see 4 different attachments you've sent, which we'll have posted up on your TWILAND website, and I strongly recommend people subscribe. I don't know if you switched over from a donation to a subscription yet, but people need to support what you're doing because you put a lot of time and effort in this, and you need to realize whether selling nutraceuticals here at Nutrimedical or you, when you have your TWILAND site, you need that financial support to have the time to do all this hard work, which, by the way, as a science whistleblower, you're not going to find this information elsewhere in an organized fashion in one place, are you?
That's right. Yeah, that's why I started that's why I started an e-list, an email list, because people are interested in how to prepare, and how can you prepare unless you know what's happening. So, right. So I started an email list, and then I had an opportunity, thanks to you, to get on a blog, and I post. Actually, it's better to be on a blog because I can send pictures up there, and people can jump around from one update to another and find out the progression of what's been happening.
I saw a lot of major news items here. Let's go through the list today, because there's some pretty significant things happening. Of course, we have the dog and pony show going on, although international military experts in Europe are warning about the danger of World War III. Mm-hmm. I take a position in between Joel Skousen, who basically thinks not much is going to happen with the economy, and Gerald Celente, who's like the boy that cried wolf, and unfortunately is wrong a lot the last 3 years. I think what's going to happen is we are going to have a war in the Middle East, probably by literally this month to the early fall. It's going to be very devastating, and it's going to demand that they're going to try to put troops on the ground, which, of course, unfortunately, is not really the only or the complete solution. You certainly can't be negotiating a system that gives weapons to Iran. And then we have the economy. We're teetering, basically, and the best president to elect is someone who's gone through business bankruptcy 4 times, Donald Trump, because that's what America needs to do. It needs to go through bankruptcy reorganization because it's bankrupt. And the policies of Obama, which is giving Obama phones an open border with tons of illegals, and again, I take a position, there's lots of people that want to work here, but I'd solve it in a 3-pronged system. And again, this is something, if you're a politician, I'm trying to get Trump's campaign because I couldn't get Rand Paul. And when I couldn't get Rand Paul, I said, I'm not supporting him anymore. Because any politician who will come on my show, which has more people than cable, major cable or network television, I will not support them if they won't answer questions and come on and actually say something. But what Trump wants to do is just put up a wall. That's not the only thing. We need to have a system where we have guest workers that can come in here safely on buses with water bottles rather than dying coming over the mountains or in the desert. But we need a system where we don't have all kinds of illegals here, especially ones that are felons, walking our streets thinking it's a safe zone, which is why they have this Cates law they want to put on. And I don't care if they bring in 20 or 30 million people, because we need these hardworking Hispanic people. If they come in here as guest workers, or they have a accelerated immigration policy where we bring in good people that have good family values and want to work hard and are not criminals. But we got to limit that to what we need, not what they want. I mean, you can have 500 million people want to come here, and the economy will crash. And the problem is we don't have rationality. The only one willing to say it, because he doesn't care a rat's behind what they're doing, and he doesn't have to kiss their campaigns things in order to get elected, is Donald Trump, who actually needs to put the country through bankruptcy reorganization. And nobody's really saying that, but I'm saying it, that's what needs to happen. So Trump is our man. As far as I'm concerned, even if he won't come on, if we don't have somebody that's willing to put America through bankruptcy reorganization, we are going to crash and burn, and it'll be very, very vicious when the economy crashes and people are literally violently shooting each other in the streets because they can't buy groceries or put gas in their car. And all the stuff we put out, pardon me?
Speaking of which, now we've talked about the locusts eating the southern German crops and the northern Chinese crops. Right. And so they've got food. They're going to have a low harvest. We're going to have a low harvest, regardless of what USDA says. USDA says we're going to have a record harvest, but they do not factor in rains in the spring in the Midwest, in the Corn Belt. Their model doesn't even consider that, and of course we've had that on numerous occasions. So they're going to have to lower their projection when the crops come in, which is too late. I mean, it's just too late to do any kind of selling and buying and what they do these days. In any case, so the dragon over there, the Chinese dragon, is it's raised its head. It says, I want to be the reserve currency of the world. And they've manipulated their stock market. And, it says, see what I can do. I lower the value of my currency, the yuan, and the countries around me lower their value so that they can sell to the United States cheaply. And, we've had stock market problems over here. See what I can do. That's what the dragon is saying. It's saying, if I just manipulate my currency...
2% is not enough. Let me tell you the structural problems in China, because these people, they suffer from what's called racial superiority complex. And I'll call it a spade, okay? The fact is, the Chinese are very good at business, but they're also incredibly bad at gambling. That's why if you go to Macau, it's 3 times the size of Las Vegas in terms of number of dollars that actually gamble daily. The Chinese are big gamblers. More than half of the business debt in China is shark loans, loaned over 20%. Their real estate and everything is artificially pumped up and going through the ceiling, so they have about 8% per month inflation. It's going crazy in China. And with crop shortages, they have to get their crops from Brazil and other countries around the world where they bought land and pre-bought the crop. Now, they may or may not be okay for the next few years. But as the commodity squeeze goes on and other countries want that crop, it's not going to be so easy, especially if we move into a status of what I call a pre-war status, where they start really getting aggressive with America and other Western nations. China does not have the capacity to project naval force around the world, and they won't for probably at least another decade. And by that time, the current system of projecting force will be, how can I put this, a waste of time and basically right warfare, wrong century. So the Chinese basically are going to put the screws to themselves, because it was the transnational globalist syndicates that put these 50,000 factories in China, and they're now pulling the factories out of China, which is why Chinese people are actually grabbing a hold of the senior business partners and trying to jail them or, literally ransom them against the corporate heads of companies, transnational companies, because they're pulling them out and sending them to Kerala, India, or Malaysia, or elsewhere, because they're saying, hey, we can move to Africa. We don't need to put up with your garbage here in China, wanting more wages and better work conditions so you don't die in some industrial accident. And the Chinese are getting fed up. For every new job that they create in China, they have 9 more people that are qualified by business or training or technical training. So China is about to blow up. And so anybody who thinks that China is the next reserve currency are delusional. Russia is a single currency economy based on oil. And oil is a commodity that's going to be passé very soon, because all the work at CERN is basically working toward unveiling something they've already had. And I've actually released the technology over the last 10 years of how to make a tokamak fusion reactor. Lockheed Martin released that information last February of this year and talked about how they can make a 23 by 42 foot fusion reactor that would service 40 to 80,000 homes. So it's really easy. Even the Chinese have come out and made clear statements that they can mine helium-3 for the moon, because they have a very advanced space project that they're not hiding from the public. Helium-3, which is a crystallized on the moon surface, is easy to mine because it's right there. 500,000 times more concentration because it comes off the Bolshak wave of the magnetosphere of Earth, and we don't get it because the Bolshak wave pushes it out toward the moon where it lands. And that's all they need. Fusion reactors, and of course the wing generator from Professor McCANNEY. You don't need fossil. And one of the things that I always, the globalists are good at trying to create problems that really don't exist. For example, my little greenhouse, which I put on my property, I've got fruit and nut trees, is around 20 feet by 10 feet. And I can grow enough food in that little greenhouse with earth boxes and an automated watering system to support probably 3 to 4 families with fresh food. I have it growing right now. I got spices in there. I've got hot peppers and tomatoes and all kinds of good stuff in there. And I'm really busy as heck, but it's all automated because it's earth boxes, which keep it from the roots rotting. And I can put minerals in there because I have special earth mineral augmentation using our MG12 minerals. All I do is put a little bit of MG12 minerals into the soil through our water system, and it grows like crazy. Now, if I put in a CO2 cylinder and close it off and put 1,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide, the plants will grow up to 400% faster and have more mineral content in them because it have more energy because it's CO2 that turns into the animal flesh. I asked people this question. I said, when a tree grows, where does its substance come from? And people said, well, I guess it comes from the ground. I said, less than 1/1000% comes from the ground. That's just minerals. Most of the of the substance in the tree is CO2 from the air. I said, you're kidding. I said, yeah, it's just converting carbon dioxide into the flesh of the plant. And they say, oh yeah, I guess that's true, isn't it? So carbon dioxide makes plants grow. So when people want to cut carbon dioxide, like Dr. Isley at the World Constitution Parliament Association met me in the fall of 1997, and spent a whole evening with me telling all the classified stuff because I told them about my work taking care of pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson that were geoengineering the world climate. We hear Professor McCANNEY's in the background. When I talked to Professor Isley, they specifically were trying to kind of salt the oceans to literally make carbon dioxide literally fall to the bottom of the ocean floor to kind of lower CO2 concentration because of the crazy idea that CO2 is a greenhouse gas when the worst one is methane hydrates and methane, which is, by the way, bubbling up out of the earth all over the planet and certainly not controlled by human beings or what humans do. Mount Erebus in Antarctica, for example, generates enough CO2 and methane to be equivalent to 10,000 large coal-fired generators. So, off of Pendleton Marine Corps Base in the Arctic, and we have had various scientists on the program over the years, there's tons of methane, which is 16 times more of a greenhouse gas, and it does get to the upper atmosphere. But chlorofluorocarbons are like a brick in a pool. They do not ever get up to the upper atmosphere. So the idea that chlorofluorocarbons somehow affected and destroyed the ozone layer, things that do, are radiotoxins like Fukushima, like radioiodine, argon, and other noble gases that actually destroy the ozone layer. But chlorofluorocarbons are like a brick in the pool. They cannot and will not and have never gotten to the upper atmosphere and the upper troposphere. So anybody who says that is a fool and doesn't understand chemistry or atmospheric physics at all, or true what they call space-based meteorology. They do not understand it. So so when I hear all these things, the globalists want to create all these problems. Oh yeah, our crops. Well, you make a monoculture genetically modified crop, no wonder if you get a single pathogen like a fungus, like the one in the Ohio Valley that's destroying wheat, it's not surprising that it's destroying the crops because they set up the conditions to create a catastrophe, haven't they?
Well, and that fusarium that is growing there and destroying the wheat, or the availability of the wheat for human consumption, is also found in bananas. And they're having trouble now because, like you said, they've gone to a monoculture instead of a biodiversity culture.
Biodiverse culture, yeah. Well,
so they only have one type of banana plant that the commercial growers grow instead of having a variety.
Exactly, yeah. So we're seeing this in every kind of crop you can think of, even bananas, which it's bizarre. And of course, you talk about you have one of your news reports here is the surge in heat wave, danger days are imminent, and the space warfare. Space warfare already is present when the Chinese launched a few years ago their kinetic missile system to hit a satellite, which created thousands of shards of space-based near-atmospheric debris in space. And Professor McCANNEY probably has a comment on this. So the space warfare has already started, hasn't it, Professor?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. When you see missiles being shot down that are, all the way up almost into orbit and the payload blows up, never, ever, ever in a million years happens, but happens 3 times in a row. Pretty strange stuff. But, yeah, it's very clear that somebody's doing some shooting there, and we don't really quite know who. I imagine
I have a pretty
Elon
good
Musk
idea,
might
actually,
know,
for my contacts. I know exactly who it is. For example, right on the launch pad in North Korea, the last 5 years, they've tried to do a number of launches, and they've actually had the guidance system fried by lasers from space on the launch pad by us.
Oh, okay. So that's what happened to their. It wasn't a rocket motor failure.
No, it was fried from space, fried by space-based lasers. They have them in Boeing 747 jets. They have these space-based laser systems, and they have them in space weapons platforms, including the ones we talked about last week, rods from God, which are depleted uranium rods that are a meter long and about a centimeter and a half or so, a couple centimeters across. And these rods from God are accelerated by a linear accelerator weapon system in space to 23,000 miles an hour and targeted. So when they hit the ground, you think it's an asteroid, but it's actually a depleted uranium rod causing a thermonuclear explosion when it hits the ground and impact. So
yeah, that's what they've been using. Those have been, and I think they've been using them, also testing them on the moon. And oddly, NASA keeps going, God, we see all of these asteroids hitting the moon.
No. They're actually, I'll tell you what, both people, and I'm going to say this is classified, 95% of our weapon systems are out in space for 3 different types of targets. 1, space-based asteroid and comet-like objects to change their orbital pattern and their impact trajectory with Earth or the moon. Number 2, space vehicles from other worlds which are not in alliance with the Earth and its so-called allies. And number 3, there have space-based weapon systems that can be turned back toward Earth, that can hit a continent and can have a scalar signal that can wipe out a crop, trigger off an earthquake or volcano, or assist along with space-based lasers to steer weather systems like a pinwheel and pull in storm cells in order to be able to control weather anywhere on the planet. So they've weaponized the planet Earth is what they've done.
Yeah, and the long-term climate control, I talk about weather bombing. It's a term I use, but basically weather warfare. Weather is a tremendous technology for warfare because you can cover an entire area. It's much more effective than nuclear bombs, and so people talk about
possible deniability too. Well, look at all of the areas that are drying out. They're all Muslim countries, and by the way, Islam is a perfect ally, at least temporarily. I call the brown shirt ally with the globalists, but eventually the globalists plan on killing all the Muslims off. You need to get this, Islamic allies. People realize they're using you, and then they're going to kill you all. And we're back, and I was talking to Professor McCANNEY, by the way. He's on his show, and he's actually signed up on KARAT bars. I'm just talking to Ann because I think it's a great deal for all of our people affiliated, and I'll tell you why. Because we provide the solution for your health issues with Nutrimeds. We provide the spiritual solutions with, if you want to call it the get out of paganism kind of card to get out of the false churches, which are almost all of them, unfortunately. And now we have financial get out of the fractional reserve currencies with KARAT bars, which is 3 phases. KARAT bars Gold Saving Club, then KARAT bars Currency and Vendors by the end of the year, and then KARAT bars basically bartering system, that we call the electronic, or EKB, I call electronic KARAT bars bartering, will allow us to actually create credit, so we'll have the velocity of sales. So if you're selling X number of, let's say your hairdresser, 20 hours a month, and you can prove that you served, say, all those customers in 1 month, you can actually get credit for that in the next 30 days to purchase other things you can on the KARAT bars network. We calculated out already, if we're at the rate that we're doubling, if we doubled every month what we have already taken in terms of number of people who signed up, by next year, if it doubled every month, which again, this is super optimistic, but it would be 130,000 people.
That's great.
Well, you have to understand it this way, Dr. Bill. Everybody uses money and currency in exchange. And as soon as people understand that they're tired of using fiat currency, and there's still a window of opportunity where you can change your fiat currency into KARAT bars,
Why wouldn't you?
much
Not only
a
that, when
no-brainer.
vendors start taking KARAT bars, because remember, here's what's going to happen. The
Well, you can
only,
spend it.
and I mean the only option for all the banks and all the governments that have literally, like Obama, and I was just watching the speech here with Obama, and it's crazy when you watch this man staring back and forth and looking angry, and listen to me kind of look in his face, and this guy's a liar, charlatan. You don't have to pay your mortgage, and if you're not making enough money, we'll give you a subsidy, and you don't have to pay, and we'll give you earned in your income tax credits, even though you didn't earn them. I'm thinking, who's paying for this, buddy? Guess what? They're borrowing money that they can't pay. Now they can't even pay the interest on the interest on the interest on the debt. And the only president that I think that we need to have here is President Trump, who literally will trump us by going into bankruptcy reorganization of the country, which means the gravy train stops. And a credit system, which I'm talking about, which is a very new radical system based on KARAT bars. KARAT bars already is awesome. It's now in 119 countries. By the end of the year, it'll be taking vendors will take KARAT bar currency, but my invention, which I've been working on for years, and when I heard, and it's all a convergence of your encryption string system, Professor, it's a marriage made in heaven. You have an encryption string that can't be broken. You can do, we're going to have actually kiosks that are currently being manufactured in Colorado, so they'll be placed all around the world, so you can actually vend out and actually get cold KARAT bars or gold KARAT bar currency or fractional reserve currency, whatever denomination, whatever countries you're in. If it's Europe or Russia or China, you can actually get the currency in the fractional reserve currency notes if you want those too. And you'll be able to barter, which means if you can supply goods or services or intellectual property and pulse them up and prove with a buyer and seller system like Uber Taxi, where you rate the buyer and the seller and you prove what's called the velocity of sales. So if you can prove that I can sell X amount in 30 days, you can get 30 days credit based on the previous proven velocity of the sales of those products to actually be able to buy and sell, so that the velocity of money will dramatically increase and people will literally create credit right out of thin air on real physical things, goods and services and intellectual property. And that's what we need, not a banking system on fractional reserves, currencies, borrowing money, and can't even pay the interest on the loan. And that's why all of our politicians are like that, including Obama, that literally promise us on things that he can't deliver. Again, he's the Wizard of Oz, according to Joel Gilbert. We can't tolerate these kind of politicians or bankers anymore, because it's going to bring us to the point of destruction. And this year, for example, and you made an extremely important point, Ann, that neither Joel Skousen nor Joel Salente get that the Chinese could only devalue the currency 2%, which is nothing, because they can't devalue their currency or they won't be able to afford to buy food, right?
Right. And they're going to have to be able to buy food because the locusts are eating their crops in northern China.
Right. So, as I've said before, and this is not, by the way, my opinion. Some people, I got to always qualify. I'm smarter than most rocks in the bucket, but God is smarter than all of us by infinite levels. And I got to tell you, there's times when I got to say stuff that I really don't want to say. But the birth pangs, which means the real bad stuff, that people will think is so bad it's the end, but it's not. It's just a warning sign. Starts this fall. And it's going to start with famine. It's going to start with economic correction. It won't be the collapse that Gerald Salente says, a total collapse. If we get a hiccup or a bad cold economically, other nations will starve to death and eat their children. People say, no, that won't happen.
We already have a bad cold because we had flooding in the Corn Belt this spring, and so that meant that the corn crop that went in didn't grow because the roots were wet, and then they had to delay putting in the soybean crop, which is what the Chinese want.
Well, with the crazy moonbeam idiot governor of California, they have now fallow 500,000 acres of land that produces more than 80% of the vegetables and most of the nut crops for the United States and other countries around the world. And do you know that the second largest rice producer in the world is California?
Well, and India's rice crop is failing too because of the monsoons were late and then they were heavy.
Right. So what people should understand when I'm giving these warnings, they're both prophetic and they're now. And we have not. I don't see any signs of repentance, but we need to start, number one, having food security by getting a greenhouse, even if you stack it on the side of your house. People that live in apartments in New York, they're smart enough, they're growing rooftop gardens. If you need to, you can even just put a greenhouse up there, and all you need is 100 mil poly, 2x4s or flexible PVC pipe, and you can create your own greenhouse. And you don't need to use tons of water. You can have a watering can and a water filter so you don't use toxic water. And you can use things to augment your food growing and put it on the rooftop so it doesn't bring up pollution from the street level. So when people say, I can't do this, I can't do that, you know what? Stop being a whiner and just start doing. Get PVC pipe and 100 mil poly, stretch the PVC pipe and stick the little together with a little bit of that special glue with PVC, and get earth boxes. The best ones I found are earth boxes at Amazon. You can set up a little plastic tubing. You can have a timer switch to make it water at, say, 20 minutes or 10 minutes, a day or twice a day, and that's all you need. That's all you need.
But
and you can
the earth boxes you don't water because they are sealed almost, and that's one of the points, is that you really don't have to worry about
water.
You don't
have to water much of them, no. Well, I have it set, my earth boxes are run to water so many minutes in the morning, and that's it. They're done. And the ground, food is growing like crazy. I mean, I got a greenhouse, people walk in and say, this is like a jungle in here. How long has this been growing? It's like a couple weeks. They said, that's not possible. I said, well, I have special fertilizer, and they're getting all the water they need, and the soil is all the nutrients and so on. And the earth boxes keep it so the roots are never damp, never rotting, because the earth box allows it to make sure that the water goes through, but it doesn't dry it out. And that's why it's so simple. When people say you can't do this, I'm thinking, I know where you are, Professor. You're in a climate that's much more amenable, but it doesn't matter if you live in Arizona in the desert. You can set up a greenhouse anywhere. Set it up on the side of your house. Put it on the side away from the direct sunlight, so you're not going to fry it to pieces. And simply have some 2x4s and some 100 mil poly, and set it all up with the little black tubes and so on. And as I say, a simple greenhouse that's 10 by 20 can support 4 families. So when people say, I can't do, you know what? I'm sick and tired of people saying I can't afford to buy food. Grow it yourself, and it's going to be much, much cleaner. Get, heritage, seeds, and then get a dehydrator. Get a dehydrator and get 6, Mylar bags, and you can even use these hot pockets to use for warming your hands and when you go out skiing. And they'll actually absorb all the oxygen inside your Mylar bags. Those little hot pockets. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
I know lots of tricks. I'm a prepper. Stop whining and start prepping. Back in a minute with Professor McCANNEY and Ann. So have a look at that, Ann. I really, if you sign up there, even if you don't buy a package, you want to probably get a bronze, and you can upgrade at any time. It would build a really good income for you, because in 6 months to a year, as I calculate out, I'll give you an example. We've been at it a month. For the news, and Professor McCANNEY, you have a couple of announcements here too, and any other major news items you want to talk about.
Well, the NOAA, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, has come up with terms called danger days, and that's when the heat index gets over 105 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
And what that means is, and they're saying that that's the number of days. For instance, here in where I live in St. Louis, we had 3 days that were over 105 heat index. So we would have had 3 danger days. And then they have another category that they've just started called extreme caution days, and that's when the heat index tops 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So they are getting ready for, and they're saying that Kansas City, Missouri might have half a year where the danger days would make up half a year. So,
what you're saying is right out of the Bible. It says that the seasons will be mixed up, and you'll have extremes of both hot and cold. In other words, like last winter, early in the winter, we had this massive cold polar vortex that came down and dumped a ton of snow in the Midwest. And then it got warmed up, and then it made a real mess. And then all of a sudden, it got hotter and way out of season. So this kind of extreme makes food not grow. People need to realize that these extreme danger days mean you are in serious famine. This is literally like the days of the prophecy of Joseph, the satrap of ancient Egypt, that was, remember, he was thrown in the crypt by his brothers, because they wanted this was a hotshot younger brother who thought, your sheaves will all bend down to me at some day in the future. And so they decided, we're going to take this SOB Joseph and chuck his sorry ass down into a hole. And then the caravan came along and said, no, we'll just sell him to the caravan. And they sold him as a slave to Potiphar's wife. And then, of course, realized that he actually had a prophetic ability to interpret dreams. And the Egyptian kings thought, well, I better listen to this guy. And the prophecy about the 7 fat and lean years, well, guess what? Since 2008, believe it or not, those were the fat years. This fall, the 7 lean years start with the Shemitah, literally the days that the Pope arrives in New York City and in Washington, D.C. So people need to realize famine's going to happen with these danger days, isn't it?
Well, that's right. And in fact, we're already seeing that. People have been reporting to me that when it got hot, and it has been really hot 2 weeks here, the tomatoes stopped growing. I mean, they just didn't put out any more blossoms or anything. And then once it cooled down, then they started growing again. So these, even the plants respond to these extreme caution days or to these danger days. And like you said, unless you have controlled environment like a greenhouse, you're not going to be able to grow food very well. And, of course, our industrial farmers, the people that run the commercial farming, they aren't going to be able to grow food, and they don't even know what's coming up. I mean, they aren't farmers, really, if you want to know the truth.
Well, that's why I think indoor farming, which the Canadian government did a study a decade ago, talking about using skyscrapers or what I called domed cities. Remember this stupid miniseries about eggs coming in from planets and putting a dome over a community? To be honest with you, I think geodesic type or types of polycarbonate domes are going to be necessary to grow crops because the extreme weather is going to make the normal outside environment so variable. Normal crops will not grow properly except in a kind of a bubble type environment.
You should watch that movie, Code 46. It talks about that exact thing.
Yeah, well, that's what's coming. And, Professor, you have some comments to make about the geoengineering of the weather, because I had to rip a 6-yard wide strip off of Dane Wigington because he wouldn't respect the comments I made after talking to Dr. Isley and having first-hand experience with taking care of pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson, because there's all these people speculating about how the system is controlled and whether HARP does it or space-based systems, but they have no understanding of astrophysics or plasma physics of the upper atmosphere or whatever, and I know you do, and I think it's very irritating to me to have people that pretend to be experts, that if they don't identify who's doing it, which is the United Nations and the World Constitution Parliament Association, supported by Dr. Isley, who's a physicist who founded it in 1958, and proposed all kinds of horrendous things by the mid-90s to actually geoengineer not only the world weather, but also deal with carbon dioxide in the we call carbon credits or cap and trade system, which Obama promised on January 19th, 2008, which by its very nature, he says on air on Joel Gilbert's movie, would of course cause the power rates to skyrocket, and of course the byproduct is radiation that is causing scalar entrainment of people, giving them brain cancer, like this little young boy who's got a glioblastoma multiforme, and other people developing all kinds of horrendous illnesses, because they don't give a rat's behind that it's causing cancer, because population reduction is part of their game. So people need to guess this.
Is it possible that in a high heat situation, if you had a greenhouse, a higher CO2 concentration would allow plants to grow even though it was hotter? I'm not sure.
Yes, it will, actually. And what my botanist professor back in the 70s discovered is if you put 1,000 parts per million in a greenhouse, they'll grow up to 4 times faster. But if you put it in a hyperbaric greenhouse, which is 1.3 atmospheres, and I'm proposing that what we do is make for a translucent, and we have translucent materials now. Our guy Bruce McKeeman has translucent hyperbaric chambers he can make, and theoretically we could make hyperbaric greenhouses or units that will be connected with airlocks at 1.3 atmosphere, which is actually pretty easy. The outside of the greenhouse would be literally as hard as a steel drum or harder. But inside, at 1,000 parts per million, you could be growing food at an enormous rate in a very tiny space. And so you could literally have a little bubble greenhouse that could be, by 4 by 12 feet, and it could grow enough food to support a family continuously.
Yeah, the thing is, and that's really true, and I've seen this actually in my travels, there was this Filipino woman who came to a what do you call it, the farmer's market, and she
Right.
had all this produce. And I said to her, "Wow, you must have a pretty big place." She goes, "No, it's in my backyard." And she said it's about a 10 by 10 garden. This woman had more stuff than, and she'd stand there all day.
But you know what they discovered in Russia? During the time of the Russian Revolution, that 96% of the food came from the gardeners working for the Soviet Union. Couldn't garden in the public plots by the state, but their little gardens, which are less than 6% of the surface area of the growable area, arable areas of Russia, provided over 95% of the food because the people could get money directly from other people by growing it in their own yard. Now, what I'm talking about is considerably more powerful than that. Literally, I call it a micro greenhouse, a hyperbaric micro greenhouse. And what I'm trying to convince Professor McCANNEY, Bruce McKeeman to do, is to make what we call hyperbaric, hypercarbic, which would be high carbon dioxide, which doesn't hurt you, by the way, when you go in. It doesn't hurt you at all. You don't decrease respirations or do anything. It actually is soothing to have a little higher CO2. But you go in a chamber like that, and the plants just go nuts because they turn the CO2 into flesh in the plant. And when you have the proper mineral content, which we use indium, tell people put indium, which I do in my plants, put indium in their soil as well as the Dead Sea minerals from Mg12, and the combination of indium increases the plasma concentration in the nucleoplasm and the plasmids of the plant, and they grow at an enormous pace. Enormous. It's just crazy.
But that gives us a clue too that our atmosphere has changed. And before the time of Noah, they didn't know about, for example, the rainbow, which tells us that they had a high.
It wasn't a rainbow.
What
actually the climate, because of the buffering atmosphere, there was a mist around the planet, so it wasn't a rainbow. In fact, Antarctica wasn't covered by ice. It's only since the passage of Venus that Antarctica got covered by ice, and then maps made by Amerigo Vespucci, who was translated from the ancient Atlantean and Mule maps for over 12,000 years ago, showed Antarctica with animals on it that were not native to Antarctica. So people need to realize that these areas of the deep Arctic and Antarctic were not desolate areas of just ice and so on, and that the sea levels were considerably different than they are now.
And the people lived a lot longer. The people,
of course, they did. I guarantee you, if you could create a domed, if you want to create a domed retirement center that would cover, say, 10 acres, and you do everything, golf in there, live in there, go through an airlock at 1.3 atmospheres with a little ozone to make sure you got super oxygenation of your tissues. Guess what? You'd live a lot longer if you're constantly in a mild hyperbaric environment. Mm-hmm. Interesting, eh? Yeah. Your mitochondria would love it. By the way, Professor, I looked at your downline. You already have a bunch of people. I think we're on 7 or 8 already in just a day or so.
Oh, yeah. This is going.